This might take a minute, Mike. In the meantime, why don't you enjoy your final bad movie ever? I promise. It's a real piece of cheese called Space Mutiny.
Time we watched season 8, episode 20, Space Mutiny.
No, I'm pretty sure we watched Battlestar Galactica.
But first, some follow-up.
Well, no, not really follow-up, I guess. Though we did get some really nice reminiscences from people about the musical instruments they played as a kid. That was all fun to hear about.
Aww.
But no, we have some news, which is going to be old news for most of our listeners by the time they hear this. But figure we might as well talk about it anyway.
Sure, yeah.
There was an announcement from the people over at MST3K that Season 13 would be made available, and is in fact already now available to watch for free on Pluto.
Oh my gosh, I haven't even been watching, I have Pluto on my TV, the MST3K channel, and I should totally have already been looking for it, and I haven't been yet.
Well, you can go watch all your favorite Season 13 episodes, from Perico to the Mother Crabbers, all the way down to the Christmas that Christmased Christmas.
Excellent, excellent. I mean, I was hoping to get another shot of some Mother Crabbers going on, so bring on the Mother Crabbers.
Exactly. And this has been a move that they've made in order to make sure that people know that Season 13, exists. Because not everybody heard about the Kickstarter, not everybody subscribed to the Gizmoplex, and yet a lot of people watch Pluto. And so, they're trying to make it out there. And I'm entirely fine with that. They were very careful in their email to try not to upset people because, they thought, I paid to have exclusive access to Season 13. It's like, yeah, you got the first crack at it. We've enjoyed it for a year. It's fine for other people to see it, I think. I think that all makes a lot of sense. What I don't care for is the fact that we have very little information about Season 14.
Yeah, it would be nice to at least know when?
Yeah, it would. And the email expressed this notion that they are making Season 13 available on Pluto to more people to get them invested in the idea of Season 14. So you build the audience more, and then you'll have the resources to make Season 14, which maybe makes sense, but I still feel like it's this weird thing as a consumer to be like, why aren't you encouraging me to pay you to help set a baseline for what you're going to do in the future? Like, why am I not subscribed to the Gizmoplex and you're just giving me little things like you've been giving, of little live events and little, Jackbox nights or whatever, as a kind of Patreon type system where you pay $10 or however much a month and you give them a sense of like what their budget going forward can be.
Do you think they just don't feel like they have enough people watching MST3K or something?
I feel like, and I don't work there, so I don't know, but my sense is that they raised $6.5 million to make Season 13, and they don't think that they can get that level of money through subscriptions to the Gizmoplex.
Huh.
And that they're not willing to spend less on their product, let's say.
Oh. Well, I guess that's nice. I mean, I'm happy that they're not going to put out a cruddy product with, less than the kind of budget that they'd like to actually have. I imagine they might lose some of the people who are involved if they had to lower their budget. I don't know.
Yeah, it's certainly true that they could probably lose some of, Patton and Felicia and maybe Jonah if they wanted to save a little bit of money. And I'm sure they don't want to do that. I'm sure nobody involved wants to do that. Anyway, best of luck to them.
Yeah.
And I hope that Season 14 comes sooner rather than later and that it doesn't require a massive Kickstarter campaign.
Fingers crossed.
But let's go back in time when things were on cable television and life was maybe simpler.
Was it, though?
Let's find out. This time we watched Season 8, Episode 20, Space Mutiny. Look, I can't pretend I fully understand what's going on in this movie. There's a bunch of people living on a huge spaceship, which left an overcrowded world to start a new life elsewhere on some distant, uninhabited planet, I guess. The spaceship has been traveling for generations, and so everybody who's on the spaceship was born there and will die there. Except maybe not, because the ship, The ship is called the Southern Sun. Anywho, it's passing near the Corona Borealis system, which is inhabited by pirates. But maybe it's not all pirates there, because there is a small spaceship that's carrying an important professor to the Southern Sun. And the pilot, our hero, a guy named Dave Ryder. Anyway, apparently he's not from the Southern Sun, but there also don't seem to be any allies close enough to the Southern Sun to hail when things get a little spicy on the ship. So where does Dave come from? Anyway, let's not try to make too much sense of it all. The head of the ship's police force is a guy named Elijah Calgon, and Calgon is tired of living on the ship. He wants to settle on a planet and enjoy real power, I guess. Anyway, he's been abusing his authority to systematically turn the ship's police force into his personal army, and then to kill anyone who opposes him. Or, I say kill, but some of them just go unconscious, and then are stripped to their underwear, and then are entirely wrapped in cling film. So, yeah, anyway, he's been doing this for a while, but no one has noticed, I guess, including the commander of the ship. But as they approach this pirate sector, Calgon decides the time is right to take over the ship. So Calgon and his men start killing people. And so the commander puts this pilot, Dave, in charge of whatever the troops are that aren't the police force. I don't know who that is. Anyway, why does he pick Dave to lead the troops? Who knows? But his daughter, Leah, has the hots for Dave, so maybe that's part of it. Anyway, there's a bunch of confused fighting, and a lot of guys fall over railings and plunge to their death, like a lot of guys, over a lot of railings. But anyway, in the end, Dave and Leah manage to stomp out the rebellion and kill Calgon. Or do they? Right, turns out he's still alive at the end. I guess we'll get a sequel someday. But today is not that day. For now, at least, that's the end.
Meanwhile, on the Satellite of Love, never let it be said that Mike ignores opportunities for the bots to improve themselves. Since we are orbiting above Roman times, Mike's gotten out his Encyclopedia set so the bots can learn more about it. But the Encyclopedias are so old. Mike is inspired to get a new set, one link to the internet to automatically update. And the bots are sad because what they really wanted to do wasn't learn stuff. They wanted to complain. And like Crow, I miss complaining already. In Roman times, Pearl and Co. are in jail. Yes, the jig is up, and Flavia knows they aren't gods. Bobo is being tortured, and they've taken Brain Guy's brain away, which makes him just Guy, I guess. Pearl promises if Mike helps him get the brain back, he won't have to watch another bad movie ever again. But Brain Guy gets the whole bring Mike down request wrong a lot. Because he hasn't got a brain. At least he can send Mike his last bad movie ever. Pearl promises. At movie break, Mike is alone at last. He puts on a classical record and sips espresso or tea or something. P.S. We totally don't believe that that's what Mike does when he's all alone. Anyway, crash! Boom! Ceiling tiles fall! The bots are out racing around, chasing each other in spaceships. No, actually, not spaceships, escape shuttles. Yes, there were escape shuttles on board the Satellite of Love all this time. A little more movie, and we find Mike reading the Pelican Brief. Sure. Crow comes up dressed as a Balerian. He's a Balerian. Or is he? Yes, because it explains so much. Wait, is he? Maybe? No. Yes? This is the sketch, folks. I think it was a thinly veiled excuse to put Crow in a danskin leotard and a big ol' frizzly blonde wig. In jail, Bobo starts regurgitating things to help free Pearl and Co., which is gross. He eventually barfs up a hairpin, unlocks his cuffs, goes out to get a bunch of bananas, locks himself back up without the bananas, and starts hitting himself. Brain Guy wants lettuce. Tom has decided he's obsessed with safety. Safety railings, that is. He has put them up everywhere on the SOL. Crow falls prey to the spinning spike railing, and Mike trips over a railing to fall into a moat. Somehow, I don't think OSHA would approve. Inspired by Bolt Vanderhuge, Crow has decided to become buff. He worked out, yeah! Now he wears a white tank top and has a small bump on his arm. No more Poindexter Crow, oh no! Tom, on the other hand, has done like one leg press and becomes a behemoth. Now, if he doesn't lift, he dies. So could he get a spot? In jail, one Roman soldier has decided to bring Brain Guy his, brain. Thank goodness, as Pearl was just about to make her peace with God or whatever, Mike distracts Flavia with spitty raspberries. Because speech with lady, too much. And while everyone escapes, Bobo lights the world on fire for cheese. What do you think, sirs?
Space Mutiny!
Space Mutiny!
It's an episode of MST3K that is beloved by fans. But will it be beloved by us? Well, let's find out.
Only time will tell, Chris.
Tune in next week while we... Wait, no, that is now. That's now. We gotta...
Okay, you're right. I enjoyed it. I had a good time. The movie was super silly and absolutely ridiculous. The riffing was mostly fun and funny. The sketches were okay. I'm still not sold on Roman times, though. What's up with Roman times? I don't get it.
Well, it doesn't matter. It's over. This is the last Roman Times episode. This is also the last episode of Season 8 for us here on the podcast. We have done all of them. There were 2 more in the sequence that we did out of time, so to speak, because, the next one, Time Chasers, they're back in the wormhole and things are calm and it doesn't really matter.
And that's when the pledge drive happens, right?
No, that's on the one after that, Overdrawn at the Memory Bank. That has the pledge drive, which also is sort of outside of this canon entirely. So, yeah, we did it. We made it through Season 8. I will say, getting back to this being a beloved episode, when they did that big poll, this episode was the second most popular episode of all time after Manos.
Wow. Okay, so I enjoyed this episode, but I don't think I enjoyed it second only to Manos. I enjoyed the episode very much. The movie was silly, silly, silly. The outfits were silly, silly, silly. But second only to Manos? I don't know. In my heart, Alien from LA is always number 2. I don't understand.
Alien from LA came in number 47 on that list.
Wrong. People are wrong. Sorry.
Yeah, well, people have tastes. I think this episode is highlighting a really fantastic find. It's a really great, awful movie.
It is.
It's a real mess of a movie, and I can't think of a better way to watch it than with some friends who are making jokes along the way. It is a perfect film for MSC3K. I'm super glad they did it.
Mm-hmm.
Do I love this episode? I mean, I don't hate it. There's, a few moments that made jokes that I thought were a little unfortunate, but for the most part, the riffing just served to help me watch the movie, in a sense.
Which is sort of what the show's all about, right?
Yeah, sometimes I really enjoy the riffing, but sometimes it's just there to make the movie more palatable. I don't know. The riffing's fine. Maybe it's because I approached this already spoiled to all of the various nicknames for Dave Ryder. The Slab, Bulkhead, Flint, Iron, Stag, Bolt, Vanderhuge.
That was so much fun.
See, I thought you might enjoy it, and maybe I would have enjoyed it too if I hadn't heard people talk about it for many, many years before I finally saw the episode, which this is not my first time seeing the episode for this episode, but it was within the last 10 years that I finally watched the episode after having heard so much about it.
Big McHugerkins. Yeah. No, it was awesome. Having those silly names for, what's his name?
Dave Ryder is the character's name. Dave Ryder.
Wow. Do they ever say his name in the movie? I don't even remember them saying his name in the movie. He's just the pilot, and then like Leah's boyfriend, and then like Mr. McBufferkin. So
they do say his name, but there's these guys talking over it during it, so it's easy to miss sometimes.
his name is so not important. What's really important is that he's wearing that white tank top, and he's super buff, and he's got like a flat top, because it's the 80s. What?
Well, I think this is a very nice episode to end our survey of Season 8 on. It's not my favorite episode of Season 8. Of course, that's actually going to be overdrawn, but it's a pretty good one. It's pretty good. But so I want to talk a little bit about how this movie got made, if it even did.
You mean like whose warehouse they borrowed for the weekend and why there's a warehouse on a spaceship? I don't know. That was the commentary that we were having, my partner and I, as we were watching it. It's just like, what spaceship has this enormous open space?
Yep.
Like, spaceships are compact, people. Like, that's just the way it works.
Well, also, you might have noticed that the space that they were in, it was an electrical plant, that it had windows, really big windows that let in a lot of light, the kind that you don't get when you're in space.
Are you kidding? Like, even Star Trek Enterprise has big windows.
Yeah, but they don't bleed light through them.
No, it's true. They tend to have, the vastness of space outside. But they are right by, like, Corona Borealis, and that sounds like a very bright place.
Yeah, I think if it was pointed directly at a sun that was that bright, it'd be dangerous. I don't know. Maybe not, though. Who knows?
Anyway.
So, who directed this movie?
Oh, they say the name of the director a lot.
Yeah, they do. Well, or do they? Because the name of the director that we see in the opening credits is David Winters. And does that name ring a bell for you?
It should, right? Tell me why it should ring a bell.
It probably wouldn't, actually. But you may have seen him in other things before. He started out his career as a dancer and choreographer, and he was in both the stage and film version of West Side Story.
Oh, I assume you're talking about the film version with Natalie Wood from the 60s.
Yeah, the original one. He was not in the recent one.
Well, I mean, who knows? They bring actors back for things all the time if they're still around.
I mean, yes, they did bring Rita Moreno back for the new version of it, which is delightful, I suppose. I haven't seen the new version. I did see the old version, and I believe I talked about it on a previous episode. But no, he played Arab, which is one of the jets, with a name. I never fully got a good explanation for why he's called that, but there you go.
Yeah. Wow, the 60s were awesome. Whew!
He also then did some choreography for some other things you might have seen. He choreographed Viva Las Vegas.
Viva Las Vegas.
Elvis Presley and Anne Margaret. And he also did the choreography for another Anne Margaret vehicle, Kitten with a Whip.
Oh, that one's a fun one.
Yeah, riffed back in season 6. He also choreographed a little thing called the Star Wars Christmas Special.
Oh, I hear it's really hard to get a copy of that, Chris.
I mean, I think you can find it on YouTube usually.
Well, that's the power of the internet now, but
yes,
for years
once upon
and
a
years,
time, it was very much attempted to be suppressed. Absolutely. So, as you might be able to guess by the fact that he's doing the choreography for the Star Wars Christmas Special, by the time the 80s rolls around, his career is not doing so good.
Oh.
But he started directing genre films like the last horror film, which I guess some people really like. I haven't seen it, but it does star Carol Monroe from Star Crash.
Oh, nice. And
he directed 1986's Thrashin', which is a teen skateboarding movie.
A teen skateboarding movie in the 80s. That's, it's a little before Gleaming the Cube with Christian Slater, so,
Yeah, this was with Josh Brolin.
Stop. Right after his winning turn in the Goonies?
Yeah. It was supposed to be with Johnny Depp, but he didn't answer their phone calls as far as I can tell.
What? Come on.
But anyway, then he started a production company called Action International Pictures, which is not to be confused with American International Pictures, which also gave us a bunch of MST3K episodes. But Action International Pictures gave us Space Mutiny. So David Winters decided he wanted to steal the plot from Battlestar Galactica.
Did they? They didn't steal the plot from Battlestar Galactica, though. There's like almost no conflict with an external alien race.
Well, it does have a huge ship full of people who are on a generations-long voyage, and there's a traitor among them.
Yes. Okay. Totally acknowledged.
Also, all of the exterior spaceship scenes are from Battlestar Galactica.
So maybe he didn't want to steal, like, the idea of the story so much as he just wanted to steal some footage. Did he get it in, like, a really excellent deal, like Roger Corman got footage in excellent deals?
Kind of. I mean, he just licensed it, and apparently you could still license that footage if you wanted to make your own movie.
That's amazing. No wonder the 80s had so many really great space movies.
They decided to film it in South Africa because South Africa was offering tremendous amount of tax incentives for people to film there because this is South Africa in the 80s.
Yeah.
And so they have a bit of a PR problem because
I would think they do.
Of apartheid. But I guess that didn't stop David Winters. Oh, boy.
Well, the cost savings versus, problematic PR. I don't know. That's a tough one.
It's a tricky one, I suppose. They did end up having to hire a lot of local talent as well to do this. So a lot of the extras and so forth and crew are South African, including the assistant director, Neil Sundstrom. And funny thing about Neil Sundstrom, on the first day of filming, right before he got to the set, David Winters, I guess, got a call and found out that his father had died.
Oh my God.
So he rushes to New York and puts the film in the hands of Neil Sundstrom, the assistant director, who then does all the directing because Winters is just distraught from what's happened.
That makes sense.
But the investors are counting on Winters' name being on the credits. And, it's going to be a Winters film. That's why they put money in it.
Mm-hmm.
So eventually he has to sort of pretend to be on set. He has to fly back and be depressed in a hotel room for a month while Sundstrom is making the film in order to satisfy all the investors.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, I want to shout out here that I'm getting a lot of this information from a really fantastic YouTube video from a channel called The Bad Movie Bible. We'll put a link in the show notes. The guy behind that was able to do an interview with David Winters shortly before he passed, and it clears up a lot of the issues that are going on here and presents them very clearly. And a lot of what I'm saying is coming pretty directly from that. So absolutely check that out if you're interested in more information. And thank you to the Bad Movie Bible for that info. So
I can't imagine.
Yeah.
Can't imagine that situation. Like, I assume that, the script had already been finished and, much of it had already been storyboarded. So this assistant director didn't feel like they were starting from scratch.
Well, it's very generous of you to assume that they had scripted and storyboarded everything, but who knows? What we do know is that Sundstrom wanted to be done with this as soon as possible, and that he didn't really have a lot of experience under his belt to give him the tool set needed to perhaps make a more competent film. In fact, when he finished the project, it was still too short to be a feature-length film.
Oh.
So they added the Balerians.
Oh, well, that explains so much.
Yep. The entire Balerian subplot is filmed after the rest of the movie was finished, which is why it doesn't really interact with the rest of the movie very much, except in stuff that could be done in voiceover.
Totally. And so many of the actors that interact with the Balerians, you just don't see anywhere else.
Yeah, exactly. The Balerians were all people in, I believe, LA that were dancers that David Winters had worked with. But that part of the film was directed by David A. Pryor, who was the other co-founder of Action International Pictures. He's a guy who's probably best known for his early 80 films like Sledgehammer, which is the first slasher that was shot on video, and a film called Killzone. Anyway, in short, who directed this film? Everybody but the person who's credited. What else can I say? We should talk a little bit about the cast real quick, just because they're kind of fun.
Are we going to be able to talk about Sherry? I mean, we all signed her birthday card and we went to her birthday party. How about that Sherry?
Sadly, I don't have any information about the actor who played Sherry.
All right, well, who can we talk about?
We can talk about our lead.
Leah, the lead, or Dave, what's his toes?
Yeah, Slate Fist Crunch. We can talk about him.
Oh, excellent.
So he's played by Reb Brown.
Oh, what a fabulous name.
It's a fun name.
Sure.
He is exactly what you think. He's somebody who had played some football and then got into acting.
Oh, nice. Flash Gordon, essentially, then.
Or Captain America.
Of course.
Because he played Captain America in a TV Captain America film. He was also in a really wild cult film that I decided to watch just because people on our Discord made me, called You're, Y-O-R, You're the Hunter from the Future.
Oh. It's like a choose your own adventure. That's what it sounds like. You're a hunter from the future.
Yeah, kind of. It's not a terrible film at all. In fact, although maybe it's because I watched this episode twice before watching You're the Hunter from the Future. It is basically a kind of Conan the Barbarian style movie about, primitive strongmen, etc. Except it turns out that this is all taking place in the future. I guess the title kind of gives that away.
I guess.
And so the last third of the movie is like they're up in a spaceship from the people who've been carefully monitoring the planet and preparing to recolonize it or something. It's pretty good if you're ever in the mood for a cheesy muscle film.
Cheesy muscle films. I mean, I do love me a good Conan movie, so...
Yeah. He was also in another film from 1983 called Uncommon Valor, which is a war film. That
sounds like it. So
it starred Gene Hackman, who's good at everything, and Patrick Swayze.
Oh, who is also good at everything. Well, how did he get to work with those two?
I don't know. He's apparently pretty good in it. And I did not decide to watch this one, which was kind of a big hit, but also not especially critically beloved.
Well, Gene Hackman and Patrick Swayze weren't making only hits.
No. Let's see what else. So Cisse Cameron, who plays Leah, was and still is Reb Brown's wife in real life.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. They make so many jokes at her expense about her being like super old. Was she super old when they filmed this movie?
She was significantly younger than Reb Brown.
I don't understand them. They really do. I don't know. Like, I didn't see her as being like ridiculously old. Like, she didn't look like she was 14, and that makes her look old, I suppose. But, it's hard to be a lady in Hollywood.
Yeah, she would have been, 34, I guess?
Yeah, that does make her old for being a leading lady, I guess.
And Reb Brown would have been 40. So.
Wow.
Cameron had a bit of a career for a while. Small roles in most things, probably most notably a few years before Space Mutiny. She was in Porky's 2 the next day, playing a character whose name is listed here as Sandy Latoy, I think is how we're pronouncing that. She appears in a scene where you can see her breasts. So go for that if that's what you're looking for.
That is the point of the Porky's movies, if I understand. I don't really know. I've never really seen them. I've only seen, like the posters for them. And it basically just seems like an excuse to see boobs.
Yeah. Space Mutiny was more or less her last work. She did appear in something in the 90s in a small role, I believe. But this was basically her peak. And then she stopped. And fair enough.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Who else do you want to know about?
I want to know about the commander. The entire time that I was watching it, I'm like, this guy is giving me vibes like I know who he is, like I'm recognizing him from something, but I never really could quite place the commander. The one that they make fun of as having a Santa Claus beard. Maybe he was just giving me like Lorne Greene vibes or something like that. Or I don't know, like side character on, Buck Rogers in the 24th century or something.
That was Cameron Mitchell. He had a long career as an actor. He was in a few things. He played the son of Willie Loman in Death of a Salesman. He then went into some more like like Mario Bava type films. And then he was in a lot of exploitation and horror films. So you might have seen him in something. He was in a lot of roles.
I mean, I certainly had the feeling the entire time I was watching this movie that apart from having seen this as an MST3K episode, that I very well might have actually seen this movie in the 80s, like when I was 10 or something. 'Cause like just the whole outfit he was wearing, the whole way he was made up, like the commander particularly, as well as like the Calgon, were both giving me like, I am getting some serious deja vu watching this. And I don't think it's because I've seen this MST3K before.
Well, I can't speak to that, but you also might have recognized him because several of his children are in the movie as well. There's a guard with a little mustache that looks like John Waters. They make a joke. Doesn't really look that much like him, but close enough.
I remember him.
Yeah, that's his son, Chip. And then the voice of the Balerian woman is his daughter, Camille. And his partner, Hope Holiday, was the executive producer of the movie. So you got a lot of nepotism going on with that.
Sure. Or just people who were around when you were making the movie and, we could just fill them in for this role. Although really a little nepotism because they got a line. Come on. So many other of the enforcers did not get lines. Do we need to talk about Calgon?
Yes, Calgon's the other person I think who's worth mentioning. Calgon is played by John Phillip Law, who also has had a tremendous career. He's in another MST3K movie. He stars in Danger Diabolique, which is the last episode of season 10 of the last of the sci-fi era episodes. But you might recognize him from, any number of other things, but I think most notably, he was in Barbarella, which I recently told you had to watch.
And I finally watched it. For years and years, all I have known about Barbarella is like the poster and also like the Jane Fonda starring. But wow, was I not expecting that movie.
What did you think Barbarella was going to be like?
I had no idea. I had no idea what to expect other than like it starred Jane Fonda and she wore furs at some point. That was about all I knew about the movie. I was so shocked by the number of times that she got to change her clothes, but was still wearing nothing. I mean, it was just astonishing. And anytime she had an outfit on long enough that was covering her skin, I knew that something was going to happen to like rip apart that outfit so that we could see her skin again. It was so important. So yeah, no, that movie was amazing. Wow, Chris, I can't believe that I have known you for how many years now? And this is the first time I saw Barbarella.
I do apologize for that. I just assumed you'd seen it. Did you recognize Calgon in it?
So I didn't recognize it as Calgon. I recognize, the gentleman who plays Calgon plays the angel inside of Barbarella. And when I saw the angel, I was like, that is definitely the guy that I recognize from Space Mutiny. But when I looked at him, I was just like, but who is he in Space Mutiny? And I thought he was the commander's second lieutenant or whatever it is, mostly because he's, blonde and the angel is blonde inside of Barbarella, and I was totally taken in by the blondness. Also, for some reason, I just did not think that Calgon had blue eyes. Maybe it's because all of his other coloring was made darker. I don't know. But yes, I thought that the angel was the guy who they call Sting, who's the second lieutenant. It isn't. It's Calgon. I had to look it up. And then after I looked it up, I was like, no, it still doesn't look like him.
Well, I think if anything, that shows the amount of range that John Phillip Law has, where he can be chewing the scenery as Calgon, and then he can be this placid blind angel in Barbarella, and really just give off very different people vibe. He's also in another movie, I should say. He's in It's Just a Show favorite movie, Skidoo, which I haven't made you watch, and I might someday, despite it being not a good movie.
Well, I mean, now that I'm a co-host on It's Just a Show, if that's a loved movie by this show, I feel like I need to watch it.
Yeah, I made Adam finally watch it.
It's like in the notes, right? It's on the family crest. Like, we love this movie, or at least we've seen it.
We love talking about the bizarre movie Skidoo. So yeah, if you want to watch the Jackie Gleason, Carol Channing, Frankie Avalon, Fred Clark, John Phillip Law, Peter Lawford, Groucho Marx movie Skidoo.
Wow.
I recommend it. It's a weird movie.
Hey everybody, it's time for the Shallow 13.
It's time for the Shallow 13. 13 facts about today's experiment, Space Mutiny, at least one of which was taken from a podcast about Battlestar Galactica. Go, Charlotte, go!
As the title credits roll, some extremely 80s sounding instrumental music plays, and Mike riffs.
Sounds like someone owns himself a DX7 keyboard, huh?
The Yamaha DX7 was introduced in 1983 and became one of the best-selling synthesizers of all time. Songs you might have heard that feature the DX7 include Take On Me, Take My Breath Away, Nothing's Gonna Stop Us Now, from the soundtrack to Mannequin, and many, many, many more.
Early in the movie, Tom describes Calgon as...
It's like an Armand Asante wannabe.
Armand Asante is an actor who is perhaps best known for playing mafia guys like John Gotti in the 1996 HBO film Gotti. He typically wears his hair pushed back, like Calgon, or like Gotti.
Oh, wait, we should probably explain the Calgon thing. Calgon is a company that makes bath and beauty products. Their name is a portmanteau of calcium gone, because the first product they sold was a water softener whose ads touted the product as a, quote, ancient Chinese secret.
But most of the references in this episode are from ads for Calgon's bath powder. Imagine a stressed businesswoman from the 1980s thinking of the stresses of her life. Oh, the kids, the commutes, the angry bosses, until she cries out, Calgon, take me away, and then has a nice bubble bath.
The Balerians are space witches, and we know they can do magic things because their cell is filled with those glass balls that look like they have lightning trapped inside them, which gets attracted to your hand if you touch it. They're called plasma globes, and they're a variant of the plasma lamp invented by Nikola Tesla. The orb is filled with a noble gas, usually neon, though adding a bit of argon or xenon will cause the plasma filaments to make fancier shapes.
During a close-up on one of the plasma globes, Tom says,
Now switch live to Spencer's Gifts.
Spencer Gifts, also known as Spencer's, was at first a mail-order catalog, but in the 60s they started opening stores in malls, where some say they can still be found to this day. They specialize in novelty items, like plasma globes, as well as sexually risque clothing for teens. You know, mall stuff.
While Leah dances with a hula hoop at the very 80s and very brightly lit dance club, Tom says,
Now, without Metrical, this would not be possible.
Metrical was a powder that, when mixed with water, became a low-calorie meal replacement for people on a diet. It was first introduced in 1959 and was reasonably popular, but by the 70s, people had grown bored of drinking chalky shakes. Oh, and the FDA connected a few dozen deaths to liquid protein products in 1978, so that was the end of that.
Her dancing also inspires Mike to say,
This is less subtle than an Annie Sprinkle performance piece.
Annie Sprinkle is a performance artist and former sex worker whose work since the early 80s has been extremely sex-positive and not especially subtle. But why should it be?
Annie Sprinkle's entrance into the world of sex work began when, at the age of 18, she started dating Gerard Damiano, the director of the notorious 1972 erotic film Deep Throat. Deep Throat's star, Linda Lovelace, was apparently coerced by her abusive husband into starring in the film. But she would soon leave that jerk and, in 1975, start dating David Winters, alleged director of Space Mutiny.
As Calgon escapes on one of those ridiculous Enforcer scooters, Mike quips,
Hervé Villechez's death car.
Let's take this.
Hervé Villechaize played Tattoo on Fantasy Island and Knick-Knack in The Man with the Golden Gun, and, like Hitler, did not have a death car. Mike just really likes the idea that everyone has a death car.
A guy dies spectacularly over a railing, made all the more spectacular by an edit that makes it seem like he radically changes his trajectory halfway through the dive. This causes Tom to shout,
He killed Mitch Gaylord!
Mitch Gaylord was an American Olympic gymnast who did very well in the 1984 Olympic Games. He converted that into some minor celebrity, including a cameo appearance as Robin's older brother Mitch in the film Batman Forever.
As one of the Balerians dances, Crow says,
Man, she makes Shelley Duvall look like Shirley Hemphill.
Shelley Duvall is, of course, a beloved actor, probably most famous for starring in The Shining, and less famous for playing Olive Oyl in that really weird Popeye film from 1980. But who's Shirley Hemphill?
Oh, you know Shirley Hemphill. In addition to being a stand-up comedian from the 70s to the 90s, she played the waitress Shirley on What's Happening. She also played the waitress Shirley on What's Happening Now. I have no idea what Mike was trying to suggest with this joke, but I'm glad we got to spend a moment remembering Shirley Hemphill.
Huh. And that's time. We've had a request. We've had a request.
We love requests.
One of our devoted listeners, one of our Patreon supporters who's hanging out on our Discord, devoted listener Jess, got excited when she found out that we were doing this episode and requested that we talk about encyclopedias.
Ooh. Do kids these days even know what an encyclopedia is?
Well, that's kind of part of the question. They certainly know one encyclopedia, and that's Wikipedia.
Oh, I suppose that is an encyclopedia. I never really thought about it that way. But you're right.
It's where the pedia part of it comes from.
You know, it seems like that would be obvious, but some of us are not like linguists that think all about prefixes and suffixes and all that sort of thing like you. So I'll be the dumb one here. Wow. Like I just never even really thought about it.
Well, all right. What is an encyclopedia? Let's start with the basics.
Well, when I went to the library when I was in middle school and high school and asked to research something, the first thing I did was go to the encyclopedias inside of the nonfiction section of the library, and they were all alphabetized. And if I wanted to learn something about Malta, I would go to the M and take it down and flip through the pages and read about Malta.
Fantastic. Well, the earliest encyclopedias didn't arrange things alphabetically, necessarily.
How would you find information if it wasn't arranged alphabetically? Did they use Library of Congress coding?
No, they didn't.
That would be weird.
It would be weird, especially because they date back basically as long as we have texts. Some books that attempt to summarize all the knowledge that humanity has, or, a particular discipline's knowledge.
That seems like a really large lift,
Well, I mean, you've seen encyclopedias. They're not tiny books.
No, they are not.
So some of the earliest encyclopedias, I mean, there's one that dates back to Babylonian times from the 2nd millennium BCE, if not older. But, some of the earlier ones that we might more easily recognize as encyclopedias include Pliny the Elder's Natural History and Isidore of Seville's Etymologies. And these date from the 1st century CE and the 7th century CE. And they're trying to collect all the world's knowledge, but they're doing it by sort of category or by topic. So you'd get a list of what the topics are in each chapter, and then they would just dump as much information about it as it could. Wasn't the most organized system, but it was there.
I mean, you got to start somewhere when you're organizing information, right?
Exactly. The books that look more like what we think of as an encyclopedia, that just sort of have that encyclopedia mouthfeel, so to speak, start showing up in the 18th century. And Ephraim Chambers' Cyclopedia was one of the first works to really use alphabetical order to organize everything and lots of cross-referencing, like we might expect a modern one to do. But it was largely the work of one person, and it was kind of strange. So I've pulled up the Chambers Cyclopedia entry on chess.
Okay.
which reads, a fashionable game performed with little round pieces of wood on a board divided into 64 squares, where art and address are so indisputably requisite that chance seems to have no place, and a person never loses but by his own fault. On each side are 8 men and as many pawns, which are to be moved and shifted according to certain rules and laws of the game. In China, it makes a considerable part of the education of their maids and seems to take the place of the dancing among us. In Spain, whole cities challenge each other at chess.
Wait, I would love to see a whole city play chess against another city. That kind of sounds really fascinating.
I guess it's sort of like a world championship, but, just a local one, so to speak.
No, I want every citizen to be in on the conversation of what move comes next. That's what I'm envisioning, like a citywide gathering.
Right. Like one of those big Twitch, everybody votes in chat about what the next move is going to be or something.
Yeah, like everybody gathers in the town square and...
So the article is pretty brief in a sense. It's about a page long, and it doesn't tell you a tremendous amount of information, but it does collect a few different ideas about chess. You're certainly not going to learn how to play chess for reading this, absolutely. This gets translated into French, and then a couple of people named Diderot and D'Alembert in the mid-18th century decide to write an Encyclopédie, which intentionally is trying to get out to as many people as possible. It's trying to democratize knowledge.
Yeah.
And it is significantly more robust. I will not try to read the article on chess for you, partially because it's in French, and partially because it's many, many, many pages long and goes into each of the different pieces and where they come from and so forth. It's quite substantial and would tell you quite a lot of information about the game. It's also interesting because it's signed by Monsieur le Chevalier de Jaucourt, who Louis de Jaucourt was one of the most prolific authors and contributors to this encyclopedia.
So you know exactly who did all of the research and the writing for individual entries inside of the encyclopedia? Is that what that's suggesting?
Exactly, which is taken up by another major encyclopedia that was inspired by Diderot and D'Alembert's effort, the Encyclopedia Britannica. Which also starts in the 1700s, a little bit later. And it makes a big thing about getting notable people to contribute articles to it, including people like Albert Einstein and Marie Curie and Leon Trotsky and so forth.
Honestly, if you're trying to collect the information of the world and have it in kind of one location, it makes sense to be reaching out to the experts that are out in the world and having them summarize their information. Because if I try to learn about Einstein-level physics and then summarize it for somebody else, I am totally going to get something wrong. It's just not going to happen. And if you can go talk to Einstein and have him write it, why not?
Yeah, I mean, some experts aren't necessarily very good at summarizing things for a lay audience, for an audience of people who don't specialize in it.
That is true. That is true.
But that's why you have editors, and, that's why you choose carefully, I suppose. So let's fast forward ahead to, the 20th century.
Sure. I mean, you can stay with Encyclopedia Britannica for that, because if I was going to my local library as a middle school student, that's the encyclopedias that my local library had, was specifically an Encyclopedia Britannica series.
Absolutely. And when you were a kid, of course, you would have known from the name alone where the Encyclopedia Britannica was being made.
Would I have?
That's right, Chicago.
Oh, obviously.
It got bought out by somebody. Anyway, did you have an encyclopedia in your house?
No.
Really? Interesting.
No, we never had encyclopedias in our house.
So encyclopedias became kind of aspirational items for people who, were approaching middle class or trying to break out of the middle class.
Yeah. Which totally makes sense. I mean, because if you're own an encyclopedia, you essentially have all the knowledge of the world in your home. What an amazing concept. And you don't have to go to the library and share it with other people. You have all the knowledge of the world in your house. Why would you ever need to leave?
That was certainly my approach as a child, because we did have an encyclopedia in my house. And you know that I hate leaving.
Two great tastes that come together for Chris as a kid. Never leaving the house and knowing stuff.
But my parents bought the Funkin' Wagnalls encyclopedia, which is kind of a second-tier encyclopedia at best. But it was the one that they sold in supermarkets.
In supermarkets, like you could go to your local Piggly Wiggly, Safeway, Kroger, whatever your local store is, and you could get it there.
My local store at the time was Acme, but yes. Yeah. I remember the displays for them, possibly because they were the most exciting thing for me in the store. But
Yeah,
I remember the
undoubtedly.
massive displays when they would, especially, they'd get all excited when a new volume would come out.
A new volume. That's amazing. I can't imagine how different my upbringing would have been if I had a whole set of encyclopedias in my home. Because like every time I had to learn something, I had to leave my house and go somewhere. I had to go to the library. I had to go to my school, right? Like the information that I was looking for would require me to schedule time and for my parents to schedule time, right? To take me to these places because they weren't walking distance from my home. And now when my kid has to look something up, he doesn't even have to type into a computer. He could just say like, okay, Google, tell me blah, 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 blah. That's not fair. Chris, I know that you perhaps were not as charmed by the outfits that everybody was wearing inside of the show as I was, but surely when you were looking at all of this, you were like, I recognize that wear.
I mean, I was very charmed by the outfits, but that may still not hold a candle to your excessive amounts of charmedness.
I'm not sure what it is. I mean, so I'm thinking of like Leah's outfit, and this is something that seems so particularly 80s to have a cut around the crotch and waist that would come up like at such an extreme angle up above the hip bones and then come back down. And the only place I remember seeing cuts like that other than swimsuits was in aerobics wear.
Yes.
In the 80s, man, there were like whole industries of like aerobics routines that were sent out on videotape. And the queen of them all
was Richard Simmons.
And the second layer queen, because you're not wrong, the second layer queen of them all was Jane Fonda.
Yes.
Speaking of Barbarella, she was not wearing the same outfits that she wore in Barbarella, alas, but she totally wore those spandex danskin leotards that you see the Balerians in, the ones that cut from the crotch all the way up above the hip bones, almost to the waist, and leg warmers.
Yep.
Oh my gosh. And yeah, I'm fascinated by aerobics in the 80s. Totally fascinated. Partly because Jane Fonda has, put out a lot of information about her own workout series and about creating workout gyms and stuff. But one of the things that she says is that in the early 80s and in the late 70s, gyms they weren't for people except for men. They were for men. And they were for working out and they were for muscle mass. They weren't for something like aerobics, which is more about sustained movement to raise the heartbeat and to encourage like breathing as you're working out and to like get oxygen all the way through all of your muscles and everything and encourage burning fat and blah, 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 blah. None of this is something that I know a whole bunch about because I don't do aerobics. Much like you, this is not a workout routine. That is a part of my daily life. But like just this sense that women in the early 80s and the late 70s had to create workout routines for themselves. Workout routines that they had to do in their homes, that they couldn't, there wasn't a class that they could go take in the same way. That men could go and work out inside of a gym and have this group experience. And then it started becoming more and more popular that was the case, right? That these women who had worked out with Jane Fonda at home through the videotape in 1982 could now go to a studio that was doing aerobics classes. You could even go to Jane Fonda's studio because she had one, but you had to live, of course, in LA. And I'm sure it was quite expensive to be a part of Jane Fonda's studio, but she was there, right? Trying to encourage women to create the body that they wanted to have and to not have like the enormous pressures weighing down on them to, have this perfect body, but to have one that was more healthy and active. And she had done it because, as a teen and as an early adult, she had struggled with bulimia. And a lot of that was because of the pressures that she had for having a body, like she had inside of the Barbarella movie. Like, how do you maintain something like that? I can't even imagine. And yet that's what women were expected to do.
So that all makes a tremendous amount of sense, although I guess I hadn't really thought about it that way. I sort of know the next chapter better because my mother got into the Richard Simmons Sweat into the Oldies tapes.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that also counts as aerobics. Richard Simmons is certainly wearing aerobics gear. But the thing that I think in particular appealed to my mother was how, let's say, body positive it is, that it really seemed to accept all different types of people, all different types of bodies, all different types of mobilities. It wasn't just Jane Fonda looking hot people in attractive outfits doing it. Not that I'm necessarily immediately criticizing that.
No, and even Jane Fonda moved beyond like her original workout video is very much about being positive about moving your body, about having a healthy body. It wasn't necessarily about being like super skinny and stuff, but having a way to think about your body besides it being about what you eat. But even she moved on to a low impact aerobics workout and an aerobics workout that was really tailored for people who were seniors, who were going to be doing it while sitting down for a large part of the workout, right? Like even her workouts in the 80s were progressing into those kinds of things. So I don't know. It's really interesting that this movement of aerobics is really coming out of women trying to create something for themselves outside of a gym because it wasn't a space that was intended for them. It's just amazing.
But unfortunately, it seems like it's time for our exercise routine to come to an end. Do you have one final factoid for us?
I don't. Although there was a comment that they made that I know I asked you about, and I'm wondering if maybe you found some better information about it. There was a comment they made when somebody died. They said, "Death by Snickersnag."
Death by Snickersnag.
What is that, Chris?
Yeah, so imagine you're a kid, and who's maybe a bully, or maybe getting revenge on a bully, whatever you prefer to imagine yourself as, and you're holding, and you've been in a fight with another kid, and you've gotten the advantage. You're on top of them. You're sort of pinning them down.
Okay.
And you're hovering above them.
Uh-huh.
And then you start to hawk a loogie.
Stop it.
And you start to let that loogie dangle, and you let that loogie dangle. Is it going to hit them? Is it going to fall on them? And just at the last minute, you slurp it back up.
That's the most disgusting thing I've heard all day.
Well, you've had a pretty good day then.
I guess I have.
So the Snickersnag, as far as we can tell, and by we, I mean the people who think about these things, MST3K did not invent the term Snickersnag. It seems to have been a term of use in the Midwest for that kind of action.
Uh-huh.
But they were the first people to use it in a documented way.
Are you serious right now?
So we all know about Snickersnagging, those of us who are cognoscenti of such things.
Are you?
We all know Snickersnag because they kept talking about it on MST3K.
You're kidding me.
This is not the only episode where they refer to Snickersnagging. You'll see it coming up again and again as we watch more episodes. But yeah.
Like the death car? Like the death car that keeps coming up? Snickersnag is going to keep coming up?
Yes, I think the death car is mostly a season 8 thing. But
oh, okay.
But yes, the Snickersnag. They'll keep dangling that over our heads. If you've been affected by the issues on this show, if you've ever Snickersnagged on anyone, or if you'd like to ask us anything, get in touch with us. Our website is itsjustashow.com, and we are still on Twitter, at least for now, at It Is Just a Show. We'd love to hear from you. And this show is made possible by listeners like you, and like our randomly selected supporter, Allison. Thank you, Allison. For as little as $1 an episode, you can be like Allison and help us research and record this show, and you can join us in our friendly Discord. And you can listen to all our superfan bonus bits. Find out more at itsjustashow.com/Patreon or patreon.com/itsjustashow. Also, if you want to follow up on anything that was mentioned today, you'll find links in our show notes at itsjustashow.com/episode/129.
So, Chris, now that we're finished enjoying Sherry's birthday party and you've totally signed her belated birthday card, what are we going to watch next?
Well, season 8 is all in the bin, so we need to find something else to watch in some other season. What season could I have you watch something from next? Oh, I know. We'll watch KTMA Episode 11, Humanoid Woman.
Oh, you're the meanest ever!
I haven't seen this episode before, so it'll be a big surprise. But it is an 80s sci-fi movie, so there's that. Right. But until then,
I'm going to organize a Wicca Tupperware party.
Calgon, blow me away! And take it away, Theme Squad.